Welcome, friends. Here we are, another gathering. I'm really excited about today, but I hope, before I introduce our speaker, I hope you're enjoying, wherever you are, beautiful fall weather. We're having a beautiful day today here in South Carolina where the leaves are just beginning to turn. And I know our speaker today, Popli Sensei, she took a nice bike ride today to just get her in the zone, and she's way up there in Minnesota. So she said, yeah, the leaves are way ahead of schedule compared to where we are. So I'm going to give her as much time as possible, and to do that, I would like to start the introduction right away. So let me begin to say our presenter, again, Kirsten Popli Sensei, is the assistant head instructor of Minnesota Aikido and the Center for Mind and Body Oneness. Popli Sensei began training in Aikido in October 2012. She holds the rank of Shodan in Shinshin Toitsu Aikido and Jokyu in Shinshin Toitsu, and she is an assistant key examiner. Fun fact, she grew up in East Texas. Fun fact number 2, get this, she's a smart cookie. She was the valedictorian, #1 valedictorian in her high school class. That's pretty cool. She was also an all-state, is it called flautist, not flutist? I think it's a flautist to be grammatically correct. And a really cool fun fact, she sent me this article and I was like, wait, I can't see this from a newspaper in like spring of 2012. I don't know if you know about this, but there's a thing called a KC 139, referred to as the Vomit Comet. But anyway, it's part of the Johnson Space Center. And so I saw this picture of her completely like in zero gravity floating around when she was a senior in high school. That's pretty cool. I've never experienced zero gravity before, but that's pretty cool. So anyway, that's a very interesting fun fact. Well, what do you do when you're the valedictorian and you've already experienced weightlessness with NASA? Well, you go to Caltech, right? You go to Caltech in Los Angeles, where all the smart people go. So I'm looking at her resume and it says she majored in history at Caltech. And I'm like, then it says it's a Bachelor of Science. I'm going, a Bachelor of Science in history? And then she explained, get this, if you go to Caltech, you're required to take two years of core classes, including physics through quantum mechanics and mathematics through differential equations. So even if you major in history, you got to be like super smart, physics, math, if you go to Caltech. All right, so she's really passionate about history, especially medieval history. Boom, she finds herself in the PhD program at UCLA in medieval history. But she's going to explain that. Didn't do it for her. She didn't, her calling could not be fulfilled getting a PhD in medieval history. She's a person of action and commitment and social responsibility. Not that medieval historians are not committed to social responsibility and action, but the interesting thing is she immediately turned course, and at UCLA, she obtained a master's in public health. Okay, where do we go from there? She's been essentially a quality expert along the way, not only a master of public health, but she's a certified professional in healthcare quality. And for the last 13 years, she has worked as I would call it a lean specialist, basically taking out waste and improving efficiency and patient outcomes in healthcare. And she did that for about 7 years at various children's hospitals in Los Angeles and Minneapolis. And then for the last 7 years, she's been doing the same at the University of Minnesota Physicians. She's led executives through the selection, adoption, and education on federal merit-based incentive pay metrics. She's led the implementation and improvement processes for depression screening. She's led efforts to create standard reports for annual flu vaccinations for US News and World Report. And she's applied lean principles to build trust and connect key departmental stakeholders to improve processes and response. That's pretty darn cool. That's pretty darn cool. So what do we do with that? Well, you give a presentation to the Eastern Key Federation, that's what you do. And you title it, From Frozen to flow. So how many, raise your hand if you saw the movie Frozen? Okay, good. You're going to understand some of her images. All right, from frozen to flow, shifting the subconscious through Setsudo. Welge Sensei will be discussing her Ki Aikido life transformation journey, starting with the significant personal impact of Shokushu 21, that is Setsudo, then learning and experiencing the 5 principles of teaching, and finally applying the same in her daily life. Specifically, Welge Sensei will share examples of how her training has produced the daily life benefits of greater openness, resilience, and the capacity to support others in her family, communities, and her workplace. And with that, I'm honored to have Kirsten share some time with us. She's put in a lot of time to prepare, and I will turn off my mic and turn it over to our presenter today. Thank you, Kirsten, for sharing with us.
Thank you, Sensei. Ever since I was little, I wanted to help others. And as Sensei shared, originally I set my sights on teaching as a research professor and attending Caltech with the intent to advance scientific knowledge. Obviously, plans change. I landed on this career in public health from this strong desire to help others find health, which from my program, my master's, is defined as freedom from physical and mental dis-ease. So how do we help others find ease? With that context, it's no wonder that this Shokushu really resonated the first time I heard it. Setsudo, teaching the way of the universe. Selfish people have never understood and traveled the way of the universe in the past. Therefore, when we realize the principles and way of the universe gives us the responsibility to spread them to the world. Do not think that you cannot help another person. What you learn today, you can teach another the next day. The world is full of people who have lost the way of the universe and suffer from mental illness. Let us do our best to explain the correct principles of the universe to them. I remember hearing this Shokushu for the first time and thinking, I wish I could be this kind of person. I've wanted to be this person. And I'm clear I am definitely not this person right now. I'd like to take a moment to explore this one line. The world is full of people who have lost the way of the universe and suffer from mental illness. From conversations with Shainer Sensei, I understand that mental illness, that clinical connotation, was not what was intended by Toei Sensei. A different expression of this intention for this section is as follows. Do not think that you are not ready or not able to help others. What you learn today, you can teach another the next day. The relative world is full of people who have lost the way of the absolute universe. People suffer unnecessarily as a result of their attachments and misguided thinking. And this brings us to the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind acts as a storehouse of knowledge and past experiences. The materials stored in the subconscious mind form the conscious mind. Henceforth, let us cease putting any minus material into the subconscious. Let us always extend plus ki and live our life with a positive attitude. Each of us show up in the dojo with a different particular set of experiences and our personal interpretations of those experiences. We see through the lens we have created to interpret and respond to our present. If we're wearing rose-colored glasses, we see one view. If our glasses are smudged and dirty, we see a different view. Ideally, our glasses are clean, untinted, and smudge-free, so we can see clearly and respond well. In my cases, my glasses needed some serious cleaning. I'd had 30 years of living and informing my subconscious before I walked into the dojo. As a result, I had some strong, specific attachments and beliefs, which often drove my actions without awareness. And so here are just a few of my particular attachments, some of which may resonate with you. In third grade, I was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder after months of being held inside over recess to complete math or writing assignments. I was slow to complete written assignments because the world and my thoughts were so vivid, and my fingers just couldn't keep up. As the neurologist described it, she's smart. Her processing speed is just really slow. She needs help to focus. A daily dose of Ritalin enabled me to complete assignments in time to experience recess. I got to play. Unfortunately, it was a short-lived solution. I developed a common side effect of motor and vocal tics in 6th grade. So please take a moment back. Imagine that middle school preteen awkwardness, plus I couldn't control a pencil to take notes in class. And the more anxious and tense I became about this, the more I sounded like a large, terrified mouse. With the change in meds, the compulsive tics eventually went away. But I'd made a decision. By 8th grade, I'd chosen caffeine as my drug of choice to help narrow my focus and get stuff done. It worked for years. Conveniently, the more I focused on getting things done, the less I had to feel. I meet the description of a highly sensitive person. I feel what others are feeling. I notice and am often affected by minor sounds, textures, environmental elements that may not register with others. My folks were concerned. From their lived experiences as entrepreneurs and one a trial lawyer, empathy and deep sensitivity were not assets for survival. Please toughen up. You need to stop being so sensitive. You must compartmentalize your experience in order to survive. And I was female, growing up in the South. I received the clear message, it is not safe for you to do anything on your own. Walking the dog around the block, cycling the neighborhood, going to the gym as a teen, none of these were safe. My parents were terrified I'd be kidnapped, murdered, and left on the side of the road. I noticed the neighbor boys didn't get the same message. I was angry, but if my folks were afraid, there must be truth there. So I was afraid too. And perhaps unsurprisingly, this led to chronic anxiety and depression. So from these experiences, we can draw a thumbnail sketch of my subconscious before I even left Texas in 2000. First, I cannot trust my body. Second, the body requires discipline, not listening. Third, make it look good. Don't rely on anyone else. Don't show weakness. Therefore, mind must control body. This was the mind driving my actions. And this is a good representation of that mind. Frozen. As Queen Elsa reminds herself, and just prior to this moment, conceal, don't feel. Put on a show. Make one wrong move and everyone will know. You don't fit in. You don't belong here. And belonging is required for your survival. With this mind, I made it, even excelled through college, grad school, and my early career. I was fortunate to meet some people who saw through those walls, shared some of my quirks, and developed deep friendships where I felt more known. And it took tremendous energy and attention to keep that facade up. And by 2012, my life from the outside looked fantastic. A brilliant and kind husband, fulfilling career and promising prospects, a home in St. Paul. And I was physically weak, severely depressed, and experiencing regular migraines from tension and anxiety. I was seriously contemplating suicide for the third time in my life, and I was desperate for something to get me through my third Minnesota winter. And that's how I found the Minnesota Key Society, through a posting in community education. So how does the subconscious shift? The same way an icicle melts, drop by drop. On October 1st, 2012, I walked into the Minnesota Key Society for a beginner key and Aikido class with Popli Sensei. At left, you see the clean, spare environment that greeted me when I first came to their dojo. At right, Popli Sensei, our head instructor, who led the very first class series I attended. And in the middle, our basic wrist grab, the beginning of learning how to practice in my body. From the very first class, I noticed profound differences in my experience through applying the principles. I also noticed immediately that the people training there were sincere. It was okay to be vulnerable there, which is good, as I cried during my third class. During that class, Popli Sensei instructed us to reach out to someone we love deeply, teaching us in bendable arm. 2 days prior, I had had to put my beloved dog to sleep. And so naturally, I reached out to Micah, raising my arm with tears streaming down my face. I happened to be partnered with Floral Strand Crawford at the time, the highest ranked student on the mat, both female and a brown belt. Wow! Floral quietly looked at me with concern, then gently tested and found it was stable. They then asked kindly, "Who are you imagining?" Tears down my face, I shared the story, ready for judgment. "You're crying about a dog." But instead, she raised her hands and put them on her heart and said, "Oh goodness, I'm so sorry. You loved him deeply." I was seen. This place was safe. So when Popli Sensei offered the first of 3 intensive Gakuen programs in fall 2013, I was in. The Gakuen, or student intensive programs, were comprised of cohorts of students who agreed to train together intensively. These pictures are just a few from these days. So at left, the upper left is one of our dojo after a local seminar with Shaner Sensei in fall 2015, as we kicked off a year of training towards EQ. You'll see many faces that we know and love here, just picking out a few. So Ludmila Pavlova at left, Jasmine Trang Ha. We have Nico Salgado Sensei on the right, Sally Mills, also part of the Gakuen, Brinty Westland behind her at the far right, Floral Strand Crawford, Paul Christ, Cynthia Egley, Thomas, who I know is on this call. Hello, Thomas, Matt, and then Jason Nguyen and Vince Crawford at the left, second from the left there. And of course, Shaner Sensei, Bosco Sensei to his left, and Popli Sensei to his right. At the lower left, you can see our first river misogi, yes, in the Mississippi River, yes, on January 1st, yes, in St. Paul, with some of our Gakuen cohort. Notice the smiles on our faces. He is extending. And then finally, at the right, our picture of our last Gakuen cohort, our first time wearing hakama the day after passing our shodan together under Freiling Sensei. Jason, I believe, was taking the picture here, which is why he is not in that front row. So just a bit about this Gakuen program, because I've come to learn that this is not something that is a common experience. So Popli Sensei put this together, designed as intensive training. We agreed to certain commitments during the course of the next 9 months, beginning in the fall, of meditation 20 minutes per day at minimum. We committed to attending 11 or more hours of on-the-mat training per week in classes, plus monthly weekend intensives. And we had a cohort of 6 to 10 students each year. Through these programs, we learned to rely on each other in this laboratory for life. And as I learned to rely and trust the people I was training with there, I began to also attend further seminars. So Curtis Sensei and Lawrence in 2013, Harold Sensei coming in 2014, Shaner Sensei the year after. But all of this was for me learning to trust. I learned to trust my peers and Popli Sensei. Then it was learning to relax in a new dojo, learning to trust a new instructor, learning how to practice with new people and trust, yes, they're also practicing sincerely. This is safe. It's okay to be vulnerable here. And then I also ended up layering in meditation programs as well as I delved into that practice, both mindful stress reduction based on John Kabat-Zinn's work through the university, as well as a secular meditation progression through a local Tibetan Buddhist center, and began doing local retreats there. And as I continued training in Aikido and meditation, I began opening to other practices in the body as well. So at right, tracking. I began getting outside and looking at the ground for footprints in 2013 in the fall. This became over time looking more at trees and other things, and then eventually following deer. So this is actually a bachelor band of bucks that we saw just a couple of months back, following their trails, learning how to find them. And on the left, I began bike commuting in 2014, curious about how that would feel in the body. I continued bike commuting and then started adding on longer rides and layering that to more and more solo trips. One that will show up a bit later is kayaking, which I also began doing again in 2014, again, pushing into solo trips more recently. So speaking about benefits in daily life, so Shainer Sensei often mentions, all right, if you're training on the mat for even 12 or 20 hours a week, good job, meditation and on the mat training. But what about the rest of your life? So let's look at that. Through Aikido on the mat, I learned how to thaw. I began by noticing when I froze on the mat when someone grabbed my arm. I noticed when I wanted to run. I noticed when I wanted to fight. And through all of this, I could practice not tensing, not collapsing, but expanding to move with what was happening right now. I began to feel that difference between toughing up or numbing, going away, and relaxing, because my partner is my friend here to help me. Over time, I noticed I always felt better after a class, even when I showed up with severe pain or deep emotional distress, or even when I just could observe because I was injured and unable to participate. And as that happened, drop by drop, I realized, I'm not going to make a choice about coming to class anymore. I'm just going. If there's a class, Kirsten's there. It's just happening. And again, drop by drop, about 2 years in, suddenly I noticed, it's been a couple months now since I've had a migraine or I've been sick. Something shifted. And what I can share about this is there's power in being in a community of folks who are sincere about training. For me, this is healing in relationship. This was recognizing the experiences and perceptions that we carry, being able to share those, examine those, help each other see. And we were committed to being in relationship in this honest way on the mat and to learning from each other. And for all this, I remain profoundly grateful to Popli Sensei, to my Gakuen peers, to my senpai Christina Larson and Nico Salgado, and to everyone in our dojo, past and present. I know I wasn't an easy pupil or peer to work with, and I have learned so much from each person. So thank you. So through this training in this community, I had a different experience of myself. I learned that the sensitivity, the empathy, the drive, none of this was too much or a problem. I began to see the strength and the benefit in these qualities. I began to see the wisdom speaking from that depression and anxiety. And through cycling and kayaking and then calisthenics, I discovered greater strength and resilience in my body than I ever thought possible. Exploring what this craft could do. Wow, I have a body. What is it capable of? Wow. For the first time in my life, I felt I had the tools I needed to care for my mind and body. And of course, as I learned to see myself more clearly and with greater honesty, I noticed shifts rippling outwards. In my personal relationships, I could bring greater honesty and clarity with my experiences and projections. As the mind settled, I could see where I'd made choices for others and assumptions about others' actions and motivations. And I began to take responsibility for this. With my family, this opened the ability to hear and share some deeply painful experiences. When I first started training in 2012, I had only sporadic contact with my family. They lived in Texas. I lived in Minnesota. I made it down once a year for holidays, and we spoke on the phone maybe once a month. That all shifted radically when my little sister called one day after the second year of intensive training. Kirsten, I'm scared. I just drove over the bridge coming back from work, and I thought seriously about stopping and jumping. If this training could not help my family, what was the point? I had to bring it off the mat. So I told my sister, I'm here for you no matter what. We began weekly calls as she began therapy, and I committed to always picking up the phone when my family called. And as I thawed with my sister, we came to know each other better. We understood each other, and we began thawing with our parents. I realized growing up, I had made certain assumptions about their actions, and I came to see them in greater context and became curious about why they had acted in certain ways. Over time, as I developed greater capacity for keeping one point, I could both share painful experiences from my childhood with my parents after 25 years of silence and ask without judgment, hey, why did you make this choice? And I heard stories about their life as well. I recognized I couldn't change their behavior or the past, but I could act in integrity now and let them choose their response rather than choosing for them. We could grow and learn together. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the benefits in my marriage and my home. My husband Sam and I have been married for over 10 years now and together for 17. This training has helped both of us become more open and supportive partners. It's deepened our ability to have clear conversations about our differing needs and preferences and how to support one another well. He no longer feels he needs to protect or take care of me, and also feels able to express his challenges with a stable, supportive partner. Moving outwards, another ripple in terms of career, before and after. In 2011, my director at the time told me she would never promote me because I simply couldn't manage people. I was rigid and judgmental. I had strict standards. I would break people. I was not a good choice to be a leader. And as I trained and relaxed, my approach shifted. I directly credit this training with the fact that I was promoted to manager in 2015. In that role, I grew a team from 1 to 4 members. I mentored 2 into higher responsibility positions in the system. And we together as a team moved some critical pieces forward, like this fall's risk assessment and depression screening across all of our specialty clinics, while experiencing changes in my direct supervisor more than once a year. As a result of all this fluidity, I gained confidence in reading a situation, seeing the whole picture, feeling with the whole body, finding the openings, and leading high-stakes communication with executives. And through all of this, I've found and remembered 3 threads that bring me tremendous joy in life. All of them, of course, demonstrate key principles in practice. First, finding, tracking, and trailing. As Kaicho Toi Sensei says, listening to great nature, seeing the stories that are left each morning in each new place. I can move with the landscape and the creatures around me and feel the rhythms of rest and movement and how they respond to me and how I'm showing up. In cycling and kayaking and running, I am feeling my body move in a dynamic universe. I came to understand how to use my mind to support my body, not by shaming myself into discipline, but in noticing the difference in how I felt. And then music. So as Shaner Sensei mentioned, yes, I guess yeah, we joke in the flute section that to say flautist is a pretentious thing, but sure, it's French. I had been principal flutist in the Caltech Occidental Orchestra before stopping cold going to grad school. I felt that if I couldn't be perfect, if I couldn't perform at that same level or keep improving, what's the point? But in practicing Aikido, I found this is harmony. You could say we each carry a melody. When we tense and collide, there's discordance. When we relax and flow together, there's harmony. And so I found myself through these different practices in Aikido actually warming up and playing with music again, humming and singing and listening to the birds and wind and water and creating songs. And this brings us to sharing. As I practiced these key principles on and off the mat, I began to have certain experiences that drove my desire to share these life-giving principles with others. As Toei Sensei says, therefore, when we realize the principles and way of the universe gives us the responsibility to spread them to the world. Thankfully, he also gave us 5 principles for teaching. First, trust and have confidence in universal principles. For me, this is, I am not separate from the universe. Everything is interconnected. When I relax and trust that I'm moving in rhythm, I'm open to those who need me, and I meet the people I'm intended to meet. And most importantly, I do not have to be the expert to share the way. Kurta Sensei shared one important distinction in one of my earliest seminars, which was there's a difference in your experience if you are asking, why is this happening to me? Compared to, how is this an opportunity to wake up? The rest flow from there. Share what you learn with others. Practice and apply what you teach. Teach according to the person. And finally, maintain the attitude of learning and growing together. Next slide, please, Sensei. Oh, perfect. As part of my training, over the last year and 3 quarters, I've offered the following classes as applications. So through community education, Aikido and daily life, 3 different falling safely workshops, a course on dynamic rolling and oneness rhythm, a female self-defense class earlier in September, claiming your space. In November, I'll be offering clear communication in challenging times. And then finally, meditation and daily life, which were 2 workshops offered for professional staff at community education. So they requested this in particular. Other classes I've offered in and for our dojo in particular have been the morning meditation group from March through the current day. And then Tonglen Tuesdays with Floral Strand Crawford, again, from the summer to the present day. So each of these offerings was spurred by a clear, stark experience of difference in practice. And so I'd like to share just a few of these vignettes. So the first class I offered, Aikido and Daily Life, was prompted by a non-event. Going back to October 2014 now. Coming home, I was T-boned by a neighbor who ran a stop sign, just a block from home. As I approached that intersection, I remember seeing the car move, and I remember having the feeling he's not going to stop. And my brain overrode that feeling. Don't be ridiculous. He has a stop sign, and you are going to be late. That second guessing resulted in concussion symptoms and severe shoulder, neck, and back pain for the next 12 months, just as I was starting a new job and intensive training for second cue. I couldn't roll, I couldn't turn my head easily, and I struggled to remember and track the new arts and new information from my job. That year, I received strong lessons from the universe in how to receive support. And I also developed profound appreciation for my community and for Kyatsu. Flash forward 4 years, October 2018. I'm driving home from an Aikido class. It's a beautiful warm evening as I approach a four-way stop just a few blocks from home. And I can hear among the night sounds a car approaching from the east. As I approach, I have the feeling, just pause here a moment. And my brain counters, what? Why? You need to get home. You have things to do. But this time, there was a response. What's your hurry? It's a beautiful evening. Enjoy it. And so I did. I pulled up to the stop sign and paused. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. The truck streaked through the intersection without a pause. I then paused another 9 seconds and then drove home and promptly wrote an email to Popli Sensei. As he responded, I have felt for a long time that the best self-defense we practice at the dojo is situational awareness. And I realized this saved me who knows how much pain and suffering. This could save others pain and suffering too. Aikido in daily life was born, designed to teach others the 4 basic principles and initial applications over 4 weeks. So after this first class, I turned to there were a few other classes I offered as just, that noticing the difference for myself. So dynamic rolling, for instance. And then there was another experience that arose that was just very clear. So falling safely. As you heard from Shaner Sensei, part of my professional career at University of Minnesota Physicians was advocating for and driving implementation of fall risk assessments in 80+ specialty clinics. So quick clinical sketch, falling is prevalent. About 1 in 4 people over age 65 fall annually. Roughly 1 in 4 of those falls requires medical attention. So that's about 8 million adults. That's about 50 billion per year in terms of medical costs. And about 32,000 older adults die of a fall each year. So we've got, in the public health stance, a clear and present danger. What can we do about it? There are many programs out there that teach how not to fall, none that teach falling. So between this and a few personal experiences, I had an inkling of something that could be offered. In spring 2019, after noticing on commutes to the bus, slipping on sidewalks and noticing, unscathed, some spectacular falls, but no big deal. I walk out of my garage carrying a 40-pound bag of kitty litter on my shoulder. My husband has helpfully cleared the snow from the driveway apron, and there's a thin glaze of ice exposed. I step onto the ice, my foot glides forward as I gracefully descend, ending with ankles high and the kitty litter positioned perfectly above my right shoulder. It is perfect Kootento Waza. It is so ridiculous, I can't help but laugh. And my 68-year-old neighbor has seen the entire thing from her car. She pulls up with concern written across her face. Are you all right? I saw you fall. Should I call 911? Do you have a concussion? And I'm laughing and explaining my training. And her face shifts into wonder. You aren't hurt? You should teach this. I would take that class. And the light bulb goes off. And sure enough, when I offered that first workshop in October, she was there with her husband. For this one, it was simply applications of keep one point, relax completely, and extend ki. And of course, basics of Kootento Waza. This has probably been the most successful by terms of attendance. The third workshop I offered was 20 people on our mat in that small dojo. So with COVID, it's been a little more challenging to offer. It's a bit more difficult online, but still possible. So moving forward, so here we are in March, COVID's hit, and my husband and I suddenly have reason to suspect that we've been exposed to COVID through some friends who recently traveled. We immediately self-quarantine, and I notice my rising frustration. I'm used to being healthy at this point. I'm used to going out and doing things, and I can't do anything to help my dojo or my neighbors or my family. I was ready to eat my liver. After a couple days, I realized that what would support me best was returning to a consistent morning meditation practice. And I know by now, I'm most reliable when I know others are relying on me. So I decided to lead daily morning meditation by Zoom and invite my friends, at least through the end of our self-quarantine. I was honestly shocked when we had 10 participants show up with the second day, including Popli Sensei and both Shainer Sensei. Wow. And little did I know at that time, we'd still be going 6 months later. It just seemed the thing to do. Most folks drop in when they can, but at this point, we've had 3 consistent participants in addition to myself coming for the entire 6 months, like a little lifeboat, supporting one another. We share gratitudes to begin, and then we practice together. And we've all been very grateful for that respite every morning, starting our day well. Moving on, Tonglen Tuesdays. So after George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis, the Twin Cities community was awash with grief and anger and fear. I'm sure that you've seen this on the national news. I got to talking with Floral Strand Crawford Sensei, who had a strong desire to offer a class on Tonglen from her 2 decades of studying and practicing conflict resolution. So offering something to address racial injustice and bias. And I was deeply interested to deepen my understanding of this work and also apply key principles directly to racial injustice. For me, this is about noticing the dust on our lens. Aikido, from my perspective, can be seen as somatic therapy. This is another embodied way to notice our beliefs expressing through our actions and bodily reactions. We can create a space between the experience and reaction, and we can consciously practice choosing a different action that's aligned with our values. So, well-resourced by Resma Minikim's My Grandmother's Hands, other resources, we led alternating Tuesdays, trusting in the practices of Tonglen and Aikido, offering daily practice exercises to help our group feel and notice their own reactions. By the end of our initial 3-month summer season, we had up to 8 folks from the dojo and friends that we'd invited in. All of us found strength, support, and transformation through these practices. So much so that we will be continuing this practice into the fall and winter. And finally, self-defense. As mentioned, I learned to be afraid before I even left Texas. But as I practiced on the mat and in daily life, I found certain responses shifting naturally. So for example, I remember going running early in my training in 2013, practicing for a 10K. It wasn't uncommon to have dudes yell things at me from a moving car, or even to be followed on a couple of occasions. This felt uncomfortable and unsafe, and it happened even in my own neighborhood. And as I began exploring more on my own, going kayaking on short overnight trips, I noticed fear rising whenever I encountered other people, particularly men. Given the choice between encountering a black bear and people, I'd take the bear any day. So this summer, I noticed a difference. Group cycling rides were effectively on hold with COVID, so I went gallivanting around on long bike rides by myself through the Twin Cities and on gravel rides out in the country. And I found myself responding differently to situations that would have provoked fear and anxiety in the past. For instance, the fella hanging out of his buddy's truck, eyeing me in my lycra shorts as I went up the hill, felt like a flop-tongued dog panting out the window. Not a threat. Not a threat. The fellow who, when you saw that cycling selfie I took in front of that cathedral, the fellow who paused for an explicit pickup line, not a threat. I could see clearly these were simply people who were starved for physical attention and deeply in need of connection, asking for it in a really unskillful way. I could respond kindly with compassion. No, thank you. Similarly, when out gravel riding, There were dogs that would rush out occasionally to chase me on these roads. And instead of being afraid, I simply noticed and responded with a loud ki. It came naturally. I was stunned. I was even more surprised when I saw they stopped in their tracks. Wow! And the wheels began to turn. And so the self-defense class, Spatial Distance Edition, was born. This was applications of keeping one point, feeling my eye, seeing the whole picture, and responding when ki moved. Now, with each class, I often see a clear and dramatic difference in the folks who participate. In this case, it was especially poignant for me. It was with the exercise of responding to an attack with focused attention on the tip of the hand, so contrasting focus lock versus see the whole picture and feel with the whole body. I used a jo to punch while maintaining social distance, but still give an experience of threat. The teenage girl in my class shifted her initial response from waving to one side and unable to remain connected, more of a, hey, hey, to pointing right at me with connection and a clear, hey, egads. Seeing that shift in her body mind and her increased confidence, I was clear about the benefit of these principles. So summing this up, with each of these offerings, I notice the principles remain the same. And each person has a different subconscious, something they're looking for, different perceptions. Each class will draw people with a different perspective. And I ask at the beginning of each class that I teach, what called you to take this class? What experience drew you here? This helps me to know my partner's mind and what they want to learn. It helps me support them in applying the principles directly in their daily life. And having the attitude of growing and learning together, I find myself opening and experimenting as questions arise that I never would have considered from my experience. One falling safely participant in her 60s shared that she was nervous about sitting down from the ground, even from just one knee up, so basic co-attento. And she showed tension and rigidity when practicing this. So we experimented with zaku. We pulled a few out to raise the height of the ground to just a couple inches beneath her to start. And as she sat down just 2 inches, she laughed, saying, but this is silly. This is ridiculous. This is easy. Good, I said. If you're laughing and relaxed, that's changing your relationship to falling. Keep it fun and let it be easy. And I find this profound gratitude that shows up in me for each person who comes and teaches me in return. Together, we deepen our understanding of the practices, of the principles, and we learn to trust. Likewise, when I look at my experience, I see some dramatic subconscious shifts from the last 8 years of training. First, my body is mind's ally. Greater sensitivity helps me feel and follow the way. The more that I can feel in my body, the better I feel its messages and listen to its wisdom. And it is profoundly good to explore new experiences, to find my new edge and to test the limits of this. Wow. Whether it's, time trials, hill climbs, gravel rides, riding 100 kilometers in a day. I didn't think that was possible. Or going out into the boundary waters for a 10-day solo trip, portaging my kayak around, seeing this view of Red Rock Lake before paddling through more beautiful wilderness, hearing loons and wolves call back and forth in the night. I have a feeling of my body being strong, resilient, and vital. I am part of the universe. Nothing I am is a problem. As a female, I'm a bridge to half of the population not currently represented in Ki Aikido, tracking, trailing, cycling, or solo kayaking or other adventures. With attention deficit disorder and sensitivity, I can see the whole picture feel with my whole body, and notice details that might otherwise be missed. With anxiety and depression, I am open to receiving clear feedback from my body when I am in danger or not aligned with my core purpose. I am whole and complete. Acknowledge, accept, trust, and share. This is my personal development affirmation that I've had for a number of years now. I acknowledge that there is often a gap between where I am and the level of calmness or skill I wish I possessed. I accept I'm okay where I am right now. Here and now is where I'm starting. I trust I'm good enough right now. I'm where I need to be. I'll learn from my experiences. And I share what I can and let others share with me so we can grow and learn together. As Queen Elsa might say, show yourself. You are the one you've been waiting for all of your life. As Shainer Sensei often reminds us, when you feel the difference, you did that. You are the source of this power. You can do this. So my experiences are simply a bridge to others. I'm not alone in what I feel or what I've experienced, and I know these principles have helped me. That's what I can offer to others. And finally, mind and body are one. If this sounds familiar, it is. In Toei Sensei's words, the way to union with Ki. The absolute universe is one. We call this Ki. Our lives and our bodies are born of the Ki of the universe. Really, the principles of the universe and practice them. We, the universe. There is no need to despond, no need to fear. The way we follow is the way of the universe, which no difficulty nor hardship can hinder. Let us have the courage to say, if I have a clear conscience and a calm spirit, I dare to face courageously any obstacle I may encounter. And with that, back to you, Sensei.
Wow, that was incredible. Really, really. You know what I love about you? You're so intentional, and you shared this intentionality on your journey, so much so. That's it's just beautiful. So you're so purposeful, and I love your uh, uh, PDA, your personal development affirmation. How wonderful. I do have I do have a quick question. I'm sure others do too. You know what I've noticed? So Popli Sensei is an excellent teacher, and I'm sure he said, you've been training for Nidan now. You would be, if it weren't for COVID, you would have already passed your test, by the way. But when we were doing our intensive last November, I have watched your Kokyu grow and expand to the point of this presentation where you're just naturally extended and your Kokyu can be loud and confident. And as you were preparing for Nidan, I noticed this shift of, coordinating your 1 point, the tip of the weapon, and your Kokyu. So is there has this been self-conscious at all? Because I'm thinking, wow, your Kokyu has changed, and yet you're a flutist, not a flautist. That's too intellectual. And I'm thinking, wow, so you're the control of your breath as a very high level musician must have been there even when you were, by your own admission, frozen. So talk to me about your breath and your Kokyu. How has that shifted here? Because you're just a beautiful example of just naturally extended right now.
Thank you, Sensei. The difference is in whether or not I am consciously restricting that or letting it flow. Even when when I made All-State, or in the best times when I was performing, I wasn't self-conscious. Things just flowed. But so often I was self-conscious, and so I was trying to manage the body or nervous about how it sounded. And you can hear it on the recordings. So that's the difference, is letting go of being self-conscious and just letting it wail.
It's beautiful. Well, you're doing great.
Thank you, Sensei.
Well, well, well. Any other questions, Harold Sensei?
I don't have anything. No one has posted anything to chat, so please, if you have a question, chime in.
Oh dear.
Oh, here we go. Popli Sensei has one. That's right. Please.
Kirsten, not that you and I don't have other opportunities to talk about this, but I'm interested in your take on the relationship between Aikido and tracking. You brought up your journey into tracking and made, with particular reference to trailing in your talk. And I'd just love to hear if you just take a moment maybe to expand on how you see the relationship between these practices of yours.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. So with tracking, it is learning to see. It is being patient and knowing that just one glance doesn't give me all the information about what's in front of me on the ground. It's being patient and letting things come into focus, seeing the whole picture. With trailing, it's perhaps a similar thing, being patient with myself, noticing differences in the landscape. So when following a deer, for instance, through different substrates, you'll have different patterns that show up as you move through moss or leaves or mud or sand. That clear heart-shaped print that might show up perfectly in mud isn't the same as you move across different substrates. So as with Aikido, we learn to rest in one point and extend ki. Right? So when we are in good posture, naturally awareness rolls out. We aren't self-conscious. It's similar for trailing. When I'm relaxed and on one point or keeping one point, naturally awareness moves out. I'm aware of my senses and I can see that trail as it moves. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Shaner Sensei, anything else?
No, we've hit I think we've gone for about 60 minutes. So I want to thank everyone for attending and sharing time with us together. Once again, Welge Sensei, thank you so much. I would give you a whole preamble about next week and try to make it really exciting and energetic and build your expectation. But I haven't a clue what we're going to do next week. We're making it up as we go. If you have any topics you would like to hear about, or if you would like to present, I'm an open book. Just write to me. I love the dialogue. And just hope you all will take the time to enjoy the turning of the leaves, the cooling down from the summer, and take time to love your loved ones. So I love you all, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, Sensei. Bye, everybody. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.